present you smart matching tool and the matching that we make in our project, ORIENT8. This is the agenda of my presentation. I will try to keep it simple and brief. First, I will give brief information about the project itself. Then I will leave the floor to Peter. He will introduce the matching criteria that they develop, and then we will return to this presentation and try to explain how we implement it within the remits of our project with the tool that our partner organization closely developed, which is called Smart Matching Tool. So, ORIENT8 newcomers by Smart Social Mentoring, or ORIENT8 in short, aim to improve the social orientation of newcomers, promote exchanges between newcomers and host society, and improve transnational cooperation and knowledge among practitioners. ORIENT8 is a social mentoring program supported by smart digital tools and tailored activities. It's co-funded by European Union's Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. We simply pair newly arrived third country nationals with the voluntary members of local community in order to help the newcomers overcome their daily life difficulties at the early stages of their integration process. We have three target groups in this project. The primary target group are the newcomers. Secondary target group is the members of the host society, and the tertiary target group actually is you, the practitioners. And the key deliverables can be seen on the slide. We have a project website, and we put all the things that we delivered in this website, we developed, it's still in development phase, smart matching tool that we will discuss today. Also, closely our partner, IT solution partner, developed welcome application that helps newcomers to find essential information in where they live. HIVA, Research Institute of Hale, developed a handbook about social mentoring of newcomers, and we put together what we provide as a mentoring program in a document that you can find on the table. So the main output of ORIENT8 is an effective, efficient, and durable smart social mentoring program. The flowchart in the right-hand side summarizes the logical workflow of our proposed structured mentoring program. I will not dive into the details because of the time limitation, but just to show you here where smart matching tool comes into play. In selection and matching phases, we test actually smart matching tool. We began this project in early 2021. For the time being, we are in the 17th month of implementation, and roughly 2/3 of the project is over now. And about the partners, we are partnering with 5 organizations from 4 different European countries. Beyond the Horizon is the coordinator of the action located in Belgium. Our research partner is HIVA, Research Institute for Work and Society. And we are also partnered with 3 municipalities that implements the mentoring program. In Belgium, Stad Mechelen, and Sarah is now today with us. She is the project coordinator in Stad Mechelen. From Greece, we are working with Nikaia Rentis, a district in Athens. And in Sweden, we are partnering with Sala Commune. Last but not least, Klaus from Germany is responsible from developing smart matching tool and the developing application. So, this is the introduction part. It's briefly describing what is this project about. Now I'm giving floor to Peter for his presentation.
See it on the screen?
No.
Okay, thank you, Sam, for the introduction. Like Sam said, my name is Peter De Cuyper. I'm a research manager at the University of Leuven, and I did this research with Michelle Kretz. She actually did most of the work, but she has left Hiva, and she works now in Greece in the refugee camp. She wanted to get into action. So I have the honor now to present her results. Maybe first the context of the ORIENT8 project. The ORIENT8 project is about social mentoring for migrant newcomers. And this is actually a quite new field. We had like the refugee crisis in 2016, and then a lot of social mentoring programs popped up. But this field is barely studied, so there is not a lot of research about this social mentoring for newcomers field. And evidence about what is effective in this field, what works and what not, is actually lacking, or you don't find a lot of evidence about that. And what is the ORIENT8 project actually aiming at? To better understand effective practices in the field of social mentoring for adult migrant newcomers. I stress the adult because it's mostly focused on youth mentoring, but this is really about adult mentoring. And we want to provide smart mentoring tools, and one of the tools is this kind of automatic matching tool. I know this is a bit contested, but we try to make such a tool. So what's the role of HIVA? What we are doing is developing the guidelines based on good practices and a literature review. We did like 10 good practices in France. So you can find the handbook on the website, I think, or maybe one of the coming days you can find it on the website. We are doing evaluation of the implementation of the guidelines. Some told about 3 partners we have. They are implementing those guidelines, and we are going to evaluate, does this work or doesn't this work, and what kind of lessons can we learn from this practice. And the last is giving input related to the smart mentoring tool, the matching tool, and that was the most difficult part. So how did we do this, or how did we try to do it? Well, this is the methodology, or main research question was, which matching criteria are used in social mentoring programs for migrant newcomers? And how do they relate to the quality of the mentoring relationship and the outcomes? To be honest, the latter question we couldn't really answer. Stick to the first. How did we do it? By a literature review on social mentoring, but the problem was there that the evidence is very limited. We didn't actually find anything about this matching. I thought 1 or 2 articles. So we looked at the broader literature on mentoring, like youth mentoring, student mentoring, mentoring to work, but we didn't actually find a lot in those fields too. So we basically relied on in-depth interviews with coordinators and staff of 10 Flemish mentoring programs, a broad range of initiatives, because we want to include several kind of initiatives. And we collected data till, we call it the saturation point was reached. This means that we didn't find any additional information. So, and I will talk about this in my presentation, but we did a literature review about matching criteria, and we were a bit surprised that we didn't find a lot about this topic. We found some research about socio-demographics, gender, race, age, and we don't see any evidence in the fact if like similar socio-demographics or different socio-demographics are more effective. You see research going in every direction. Sometimes it's by age. In other research they say no, it doesn't work. So we don't find really strong evidence about it. We do find evidence about deep level characteristics, that's like personality, attitudes, beliefs. If you find people who match in this way, then the relationships quality is better, the program satisfaction too, and the effectiveness also. I mean, it's quite logical, but the question is how do you measure that? And then you have like practical considerations seem to be important, geographical location and time availability, and involvement of mentors and mentees in matching. If you involve them in choosing their mentor or mentee, the effects are better. So that's what we find in the literature. I will come back to that. And this is the broad literature. It's mentoring in general for all kind of so if we now look at the social mentoring programs, we see, and I will now just discuss what we found in our research. A first matching criteria we found is, and it's quite evident, is the newcomers' needs and goals. In the Dutch research, that's one of the three most important matching criteria according to practitioners. When we look at the social mentoring programs, coordinators stress that this is very important. And it is very important for social mentoring programs because newcomers have really a broad range of needs, or can have a broad range of needs, like practicing local language, getting to know the city, expanding social networks, housing, leisure, administration. So you have to map these needs before you can match. So that's a first criteria where practitioners. On the other side, you have the mentors offer. What kind of mentor offer? And in social mentoring programs, you see that educational and professional background is included in all intakes forms. This is asked for in the programs. But coordinators, and this is important, I think they stress that also everyday knowledge of mentors is important. And with everyday knowledge, I mean knowing in the city where you can find leisure activities, or where you can find activities for children or local sports clubs. So you see a lot of mentoring programs that the stresses on educational and professional background, and here it's like this kind of everyday knowledge that is important in social mentoring. So that's the second matching criteria. The third is like the expectations of mentoring. In social mentoring programs, coordinators stress this as very important. It's also in the intake forms. This expectation management is important because according to some coordinators, it can lead to early termination if you don't have the right expectations. And you have an example. For example, a newcomer's main concern was finding housing. And the mentor didn't know anything about this. He didn't want to help with that. They want to do leisure activities. Well, then you don't have a match, and this ends. And that's why some programs, and you will see a list of types of buddy initiatives. That's why some programs differentiate between like all this kind of buddies just to manage these expectations from mentor. So a particular one in social mentoring projects is language. Social mentoring for newcomers is quite unique because it brings people together but don't necessarily speak the same language. And a problem is often that newcomers have a limited command of the local language, and then the question is, how are you going to match? And you see like two approaches in the project, and one is that matching is based on a lack of common language, so they don't want them to have the same language like English or French. Why? Because so they can practice the local language. The problem with that is that you have miscommunications, like I talked about this deeper connection, the importance of the deep connection. But it's quite difficult if you can't communicate in a proper way. So it has its disadvantages. So I think most of the project they match on common language, and they say like other objectives are more important than learning the language. It also means that some matches are very difficult to make because there is no common language, and then you have to wait for your mentoring because you first have to learn the local language. So I talked about this deep level factors as a matching criteria, and this is the personality, attitude, beliefs, and we see in research that this is a very important one. And actually in social mentoring programs they translate it by asking about interests and hobbies. So, and this was a bit surprising to me, that in all social mentoring programs they ask for this kind of information. What are your hobbies? And it is really a decisive factor according to the coordinators we interviewed. And I think this is a good quote of one of the coordinators. He said like, I can't guarantee a connection or mutual chemistry, but if they have same interest, they have immediately something in common to start with. And I think this is the reasoning behind this matching on interests and hobbies. It's also a way if mentees or there isn't a common language, they can do things together and they can learn language in a more informal way. So that's also a way to deal with it. And just a question, but maybe it's more important, this interest and hobbies, than other forms of mentoring, because it's a very informal form of mentoring. It's not on a work floor, it's not within a school, it's very informal, so you need some minimal connection if you want this to work. So I talked about this practical considerations. In research, it's also one of the criteria that is mentioned. It's geographical location and time, the time people want to spend. And I think this is very important because if you want a successful mentoring relationship, people have to see each other. So also social mentoring programs take this into account. And there is some nuance in this. When we talk about a geographical location, our case study said like not too far away, because it's not practical if you go too far away. It's public transport, weather, time constraints, and also if the mentor lives in another city, he doesn't know the city he lives in, it's more difficult to integrate. But also not too close, and that to avoid that mentees want to meet at home or have too many unannounced house calls that they actually live too near. And this is taking the personal boundaries of the participants into account. And also then the importance of availability. A common annoyance we saw, or reason for termination, was that the newcomer asked too much. So you actually have to take this into account in your matching. How many needs do the newcomers have? And does the mentor has time for it? And one of the strategies, and it's also due for job decisions, we recommend the strategy, is working with the pensioners in the expectation they have some more time for the mentees. So I also talked about socio-demographics, and in research we couldn't draw conclusions from the research, and it's actually the same in the interviews with the mentoring coordinators. I have two examples. Two young people, they matched very well, and you had like a young newcomer and an older mentor, and it also went very well. So we can't really draw conclusions out of this research about this social demographics. But one of the important things about social demographics is that in all the cases they ask for gender preference. So they ask, do you want to be matched by a man or a woman? Yeah, that's a good one. You have to take into account mentoring or buddying, not a dating service. So if but they always ask for gender preference, and the coordinators stress actually the importance to take the mentees' preferences into account and give them a voice in choosing which mentor they want. And it's also confirmed by research that this helps to get more qualitative mentoring relationships. Okay, and I think this is not the last thing about socio-demographics is marital status. That's something we don't find a lot in literature, but it's often used in social mentoring programs. And more in particular, coordinators match mentors with children to newcomers with children, so they can do things together. Another advantage is that the mentors with children probably know more about relevant services, schools, activities for children, etc. So, and then the last question we ask is the one about personality. How are you matching on personality or not? Is the criteria? But we see a mixed picture. Some do consider it this personality, some don't. And some consider it based on intuition. It's not on tests or questionnaires or whatever, it's intuition, gut feeling. And when it's usually based on introversion or extraversion. They say like if a mentee is introverted, well, we then match them with an extroverted mentor, so they talk. I mean, if you put two introverted people together, maybe it's more difficult. So that's actually how personality is used. In the cases we so these were the matching criteria we found, and I'm a researcher, so I'll